Hey everybody, how's it going? Mr. Freddy 1201, I believe it was, asked me about a Carcharodons Fluff video, so I'm going to do my best at it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, not in any particular order, my theory about the Carcharodons founding, a bit of the fluff around their whole supposed founding stuff. I'm going to go into color scheme, and then I'm going to talk about the chapter tactics overall, and then go into the Badab War a little bit and see what else I can throw in there. I'm not going to cover absolutely everything because outside of the Badab War, a lot of the stuff is hearsay. They are purpose-built to be a mysterious, dark chapter. They have a bloody reputation. They have a kind of a dark and bloody legend about them. So, here we go. So the Carcharodons Astra, to go full on with their name, Space Sharks, are a successor chapter of the Raven Guard unconfirmed status. That is how the Fluff builds it, which means essentially they're Raven Guard successors. Now, I'm going to give you my theory before I go into a bit about their founding. My theory is that the Carcharodons kind of are a successor chapter by happenstance, because after reading the third Horus Heresy Forgeable book, which mentions the Primarch, Corax leaking up with the 19th Legion, he took the real bloodthirsty, cold, merciless killers from his Legion that he didn't really felt jive with his mentality, and he kind of put them on an exile tour, you could say. He had them accompany exploring fleets and rogue traders fleets to go beyond Imperial space, to go into the blackness of the void of space, and never come back, essentially. And if I remember correctly, they were basically in their 19th Legion colors, Unification era colors, which was dark grays with some darker gray accent to it / black to it, as you can see here. And now, so this is the Unification color scheme, the 19th Legion, the Raven Guard, and when we go to Carcharodon's color schemes, you can see here, and I'll talk about that in a moment, a little bit more in detail, but you see it here. Me personally, I can see how maybe the colors from the Unification era colors to the Carcharodons, how it kind of maybe molded and evolved to what the Carcharodons color scheme is now. So that's my theory. My theory is that they were part of the 19th Legion. They always were. And they went beyond space, and over time and everything, it became the Carcharodons. So, no real founding per se, just kind of happened. That's my theory. And the reason I want to say that first is because they are supposedly, and some of the fluff, and some of this is taken from the old Space Shark stuff, even though it doesn't all jive together, because the Carcharodons were heavily retconned, but they are supposedly the 23rd founding, which is in the 37th millennium. Now that doesn't jive with my theory at all, but wait, there's more. In the fluff, there is this tome that was written on Terra in the 35th millennium, referencing this chapter, Carcharodons Astra, and it says they were dispatched into the outer darkness upon an endless voyage to ravage the foes of mankind, and to set about the traitor, the alien, and the renegade without mercy, and harrow them in their places of strength. This was written in the 35th millennium. However, this tome, Mythos Angelica Mortis, which is a fluff thing, is referencing an even older text from a long-lost book during the Astropath Wars, which is the 32nd and 33rd millennium, or millennia, I should say, and very cool time period that we know nothing about, absolutely nothing about, and that's why I think it's kind of cool, because it's so mysterious. But anyway, that is an older work, an older tome, you could say, lost, and that text survived. So who knows if that's saying, and now we have such and such a chapter, or if it's even referencing something maybe a bit older. Either way, I think my theory kind of holds true, because that's basically 2 millennium after the Great Crusade, 32nd, 2 to 3 millennium after 32nd and 33rd millennia. At that time, maybe the Carcharodons surfaced for whatever reason, came back for whatever reason, and then they were just logged in as a successor chapter of something and the Raven Guard is thought because of the Badab War, and we'll get to that in a moment. So that's my theory on that. And to get at the heart of it, what's the purpose of the Carcharodons, why they exist at all? As you heard it in the little text I just read to you, they have the privilege, you could say, of having an unending duty, and that unending duty is to travel in the dark void beyond Imperial space to ravage the enemy, to destroy enemies before they make it to Imperial space, to hunt down foes that maybe flee into the edge of space, and all of that good stuff. So basically, they're there patrolling in the dark, murky waters of deep space in a way. Not, I guess you can kind of say deep space, but they're there outside of Imperial territory, and in this dark, murky water, and they're just ripping things to shreds as a predator would. So that's kind of their purpose. Now, with their color scheme, right quick, you've been looking at it. I like it. It's gray. It's some shades of gray with a little bit of off-white to white in there. And the main armor color is this lighter gray color. And then the shoulder pads are what I call off-black, which is a really, really dark gray. And the way I go about doing this is I take some Storm Vermin fur and Abaddon black and mix together just so the black doesn't look pure, so it looks slightly off, and that's what I use. So main armor color of gray, this off black color for the shoulder pads, and then some accessory parts like the knee pads or weapons and whatnot are that color, like power fists, I should say, specifically, stuff like that. And then on the helmet we have the faceplate in this white or slight off-white color, up to you. And that's when I first saw that made me immediately think great white shark, because while the great white shark is also white on the belly and whatnot, around their mouth is a white maw. So that's why I thought of that when I first saw the first Carcharodon picture. Now, their helmet lenses are black eye lenses. On Terminators, on Power Armor, basically everybody but Tyberos the Redwake. Tyberos the Redwake, who's really cool, has yellow eye lenses on his Terminator armor. So with that being said, let's talk about their chapter tactics, their combat tactics, you could say, for the chapter. And they basically think how a shark hunts in the water, kind of like stealth hunters. Don't really want to say ambush because it's open water, but kind of like come out of nowhere with extreme speed. A bit of stealth in there because they came out of nowhere and just hit something hard. That's the Carcharodons, and it comes across as mindless butchery and mindless berserkerness, but it's really a lot of planning in there. There's a lot of tactics in this, and it's a simple kind of tactic, but it's very reliable, and it works for the Fluff, being that they always operate in really extreme isolation for periods of time, and that extreme isolation means you got to survive on your own and do everything without any support. So what they first do is recon, lots of reconnaissance and probing the enemy's positions, a lot of basically scouting out stuff with scouts, with land speeders, with bikes, whatever it takes, scouting enemy positions, identifying strategic points and points they feel that are particularly weak. And then instead of using a big old armored column, which they have the capability to do, and instead of doing preliminary bombardments, which they also have the capability to do, they prefer infantry tactics, and they prefer overwhelming surprise assaults. Whenever they can use surprise, that's what they prefer. And they prefer doing overwhelming assaults into the enemy positions. And if the enemy is too well defended, if the position is too well defended, instead of having attritional warfare go on, they'll withdraw just as quick as they came, patiently reevaluate the different enemy positions, and then relaunch assaults again. And eventually, at some point, be it the first try or whatever X amount of tries later, one of their assaults are going to break through because of all the careful planning they do and hitting the enemy and basically seeing where they can push through. Once they push through, they dig deep into the enemy. They basically go right for their vitals, and they unleash their full fury, they go full tilt, and they aim to do as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible. And once the full fury of the Carcharodons is unleashed, little survives once they break through the enemy position. They slaughter and butcher everything. I just said slaughter. slaughter, to be a little bit more precise, I guess, and butcher everything. And they prefer close range fighting. They don't go with reckless abandon to close with their foe like a berserker might, but they prefer close quarters fighting, close range fighting for both range and close combat. And something that go along with that as a fluff thing, which I also really like, is that they do this in silence. They use a secure Vox network that they communicate with each other internally with. But as far as the enemy never hears them speak. So you have all this butchery and carnage going on, but yet the people causing it make no noise. So it's kind of a cool, chilling thing. It's not unique, but it's a nice, cool, disturbing part on top of their fluff. So that's their combat doctrine. They are a fleet-based chapter, a nomad predation fleet, which is a style of fleet designed to be fully self-sufficient. Again, since the chapter operates beyond Imperial space for basically most of its operation, it needs to be fully self-sufficient, and that fleet style allows that. Now, when it comes to the Badab War, we get to see just how kind of proper, you could say, the Carcharodons are. While they are very brutal, and they're very kind of a bloody fighting style and merciless and all that good jazz, they also are surprisingly formal. They formally, in the Badab War, they formally requested permission to enter the war zone. They had all of the paperwork, all of their papers in order, you could say. They stated they were summoned by Terra itself. They were fully cooperative in submitting to checks, and they spoke in an ancient form of High Gothic. Basically a very formal chapter in terms of dealing with the Imperium, and really loyal, which is surprising considering the long stretch of isolation. Such a long periods of isolation, and yet they're still remarkably steadfastly loyal. So we see all that in the Badab War, and then we see them unleashed in the Badab War as confirmed sightings of the Carcharodons in action. And their first task was the Endymion cluster, where the Mantis warriors, who were part of the secessionists, were holding out. And the Mantis warriors are really good at hit and run for both attack and defense, and they knew the Endymion cluster very well. So the Carcharodons just went about, probing the planets to find what planets harbored Mantis warriors, and any planet that harbored Mantis warriors, they systematically annihilated, forcing the Mantis warriors' hand. Instead of the Mantis warriors fighting at their strength, which is hit and run, they were forced to come out and fight, and thus were dispatched as a fighting force by the Carcharodons. A very brutal approach that did not sit well with some of the allied Imperial Space Marine chapters. Nevertheless, they were very efficient at what they did, and then at the end of the Badab War, at Badab Primaris, they were set with the task of keeping any organized resistance from forming outside of the Palace of Thorns, the fortress that Huron was in. So they went into the hive cities around that fortress and butchered everything because they were enemies. And then they went about upping the ante and saying, we're going to end this the way it should, we're going to end this for sure. And they overloaded all the reactors in all those hive cities, setting about massive planet-wide tectonic upheaval, basically killing a planet. Yeah, it had some repercussions there, and it didn't sit well with a lot of the chapters they were allied with, but they didn't care. They got the job done. They broke the enemy's resistance, and the Imperium was victorious. And then they culled a whole generation of potential recruits from the Endymion clusters to help renew their losses that they suffered. And they went about their business translating into the warp and going outside of Imperial space yet again. So what this leaves us with is a very formal chapter that has a lot of patience and planning into very simple, brutal tactics, and has a very black and white look at things. If you're an ally, you live. If you're an enemy, you die. That is basically the Carcharodons' way. Allies live, enemies are destroyed. It doesn't matter who the enemy is, or what the enemy is, or why it's an enemy. If it's an enemy of the Imperium, you're killed. End of story. No ifs, ands, or buts. No diplomacy. No thinking over it. No talking about it. You're just killed. So that is the Carcharodons in a nutshell, essentially, and I really enjoy that about them. So hopefully this long ramble about the Carcharodons wasn't too boring. Hopefully it helped out Mr. Freddy 1201 and anybody else who was wanted to know a bit about the Carcharodons Fluff. Anyways, thanks for sticking through it, and until next time, take it easy.